Right, good afternoon everybody and welcome to a meeting of the Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel on Monday the 15th of November. First of all, can I welcome you all here and welcome David Carter from the Joint Audit and Standards Commission, and especially welcome the Chief Constable. Chief Constable, you are more than welcome and it is a pleasure to see you here. While we are doing the thank yous, can we also thank Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council for hosting us today. So part of our plan was that we went on the road around the district councils at Warwickshire to try and engage more members of the public, and particularly local members. Unfortunately, I'm looking at an empty gallery, but the intention is good. So we'll keep doing that, and our next meeting will be all coming together at Stratford. So, members, without further ado, we'll move on to the published agenda. And the first item on the agenda is item 1, which is apologies. Do we have any apologies? So we have Councillor Fragile, who I understand has pulled her back and is unable to move, so we accept Councillor Fragile's apologies. Members, agenda item number 2 is disclosure of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests. Does anybody have any interests on the agenda? No? Thank you very much. Yeah, Councillor Golby?
Just to advise that my employment has changed and my interests haven't yet been updated.
Thank you very much indeed. And is there anything on the agenda which in any way conflicts with your new employed position?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, and can I just add that Chris Kettle is en route. Virginia was quite right, he's not going to make it here from Coventry in the time he said he was. So Chris will join us as the meeting progresses. Okay, right. Agenda item number 4 then is public speaking. So we were expecting a couple of Nuneaton and Bedworth councillors to attend. However, nobody's showed up. John, have we had any written questions? No. Okay, thank you much indeed. So in view of that, David, unless you've got any comment to make? No, thank you much indeed. Right. So we move on to agenda item number 2 then, which is the report of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Philip, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we've got a long meeting today, so I'm going to be brief.
Sorry, Philip. John's just... Ah, yes. Sorry, Philip. I was far too enthusiastic. Didn't bother with the minutes of the previous meeting, which I should have done. Thank you, John. Right, so agenda item 1.3, page 5, members, is the minutes of the previous meeting. Can we please do them for accuracy to start with? So page 5. Page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Is everybody happy that they are a true and accurate record? Yeah, thank you. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you much indeed. Everybody agreed? Yeah. Okay, then you're happy for me to sign the minutes, which I will do. John, while I'm signing the minutes, do we have any matters arising? No matters arising. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you much indeed. Right, and after that aborted start, Philip, we'll go back again. So, Philip, the floor is yours.
Right, just as keen to start. So, as I was saying, it's a long agenda today. There's a number of items that you may wish to look at in a little bit of depth. So, we presented this quarterly report. I'll come back to the police and crime plan, I think, after we've done the report. It sets out the process of preparing the plan. We've got some figures on the police establishment, and I think we've answered Councillor Holland's question, what the strength was back in 2012. There is a separate paper, as you well know, on Gypsy Roma Traveller activity, and then there's a brief bit about holding to account. So, moving on, finance. We didn't bring Sarah today, otherwise we'd have had about 3/4 of the office here. But I am prepared to answer if there are any questions on finance. Interesting, those 2 streams that we managed to get. My office fronted the bid to the Home Office, and we've been given 249,000 about safer streets, and some of that will of course be aimed at violence against women and girls on our streets in Warwickshire. There's another 50 million been allocated that I've been told about, which we will be applying for in the next financial year. And that, interestingly, I think will be more targeted at rural areas and rural unsafe streets and roads and lanes. So that's a good one. And then there was the perpetrator, the domestic abuse perpetrator scheme, where we've got 200,000 to deal with some of those challenges on domestic abuse. So I think I've left out the plan and I've left out Gypsy Roma Travellers, but has anyone's got any questions on that bit? Happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. And excellent news about the funding that you're bringing into Warwickshire. Thank you very much indeed. Members, does anybody have any questions about the Commissioner's report not associated with the draft plan? No? Okay then. Thank you very much indeed. You're on a roll, Philip. So to the draft plan.
So far. So the plan, and I hope everyone's had a chance to read it. It is now in its 5th iteration, and we're very much hoping, following this meeting, to start to populate the plan with some graphics and some photographs and tidy it up, and then it'll be up on public release. And we're just deciding how we actually launch the plan. I'm talking to Neil Chipton about how we do that. So the plan has taken, really, ever since I was elected, again in May. A lot of work has gone into it. We've spoken to a lot of partners in this business. I'd like to add, it doesn't say it so in the plan, but it sort of follows and mirrors the platform I stood on at the election, the manifesto, which had 85,000 ticks in the box. So that's quite a good, we thought that was quite a good consultation. And lots of other things, and you'll see that there have been some various surveys done and public consultations by Warwickshire Police, by ourselves, by the County Council. They are all listed there on page 27 of the agenda. We've done the plan on the page, which I did share with you last time, and plainly that has now been fleshed out with much more detail in it. But those are the topics, those 5 topics at the top are, as I understand, the concerns of our residents, and that is why they are in that particular order. And then underneath there are some more detailed headings that we need to tackle, and then of course there's under each priority there is 2 or 3 pages of prose to explain a little bit more about it. And you probably saw, Mr. Chairman, that at the end of each section we've done a thing. What does good look like? What success look like? So the point of that is to begin to, obviously to hold the force to account and other partners, but to try to work out as to where we can put some KPIs, which is a question you asked last meeting, some meaningful ones that we can report back to the panel. I suspect we've got the answers to most of it. I mean, we don't give you all the information on crime statistics and other matters because you would be overwhelmed with it all. So a lot of the information I think you're probably looking for we've already got, but hopefully I gather there may be some sort of working group looking at that, and my office would be very pleased to take part in that working group. So that does the 5 priorities. Shall I just quickly whip through the rest of it? We've then got a section on as you can see about so after priority 5 we then move on to how this fits in with national and local priorities, with strategic policing requirement, policing vision. That is a document that is national, but we have our own vision here in Warwickshire, which I'm sure the Chief Constable will talk about. There's the Beating Crime Plan, which came out this summer, which we need to take cognizance of, and there are some other strategies that are coming down from Home Office, Ministry of Justice, etc., which we need to take notice of. There's a section on local priorities, which is important, and then we move on to the equality and diversity question. Although our police officers don't quite reflect the population of Warwickshire. As an overall organisation of 1,900 or 2,000 people, we pretty well do, but there is still work to be done on the police officer cohort of the organisation. You'll see there's a section on keeping track with some good questions there that I will be asking when I go to public meetings, what people's opinions are on those questions about how do people feel, how we are preventing, reducing, how well are vulnerable people safeguarded, and there are 9 questions there which are of great importance to me. There's then the national crime and policing measures set out by the government, which we've taken into account. And then, of course, there's the holding to account duty that I have, which explains that we have regular meetings and we have performance meetings, budget monitoring groups, and all that, the detail that's needed to discuss to hold the force to account. Also mentions the Local Criminal Justice Board, which I chair. There's plenty of work to be done there as well. That's all part of the plan, so it isn't just policing and crime, it's about criminal justice as well. Funding, very important. We have taken the decision to prepare balanced budgets going forward. We want to see that we have a sensible level of reserves, not too high, not too low, but a level of reserves that could cover unknown occurrences in the future, but not just sitting on taxpayers' money in a bank account. There is no point in doing that. The funding, we've explained about the, as I'm sure you all know, about how we get roughly half our money from central government and the other half from council tax. That is a decision that you will be very much involved with in January on the level of precept. Value for money, and then of course the commissioning and grant funding process is an important part of my office's work. All commissioning and grant funding will have to comply or conform with the principles and some of it detail laid out in the plan. So that I think is a good test of whether commissioned services and one-off grant funding is helping us to put this plan into action. And then on the back, there's quite a useful graphic as to who's responsible to who and who does what, which is helpful. So that's the plan, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. And as you know, Philip, we hold a pre-meeting, so we've got a series of questions to come to you, and then we'll just take any others that come up. But can I just say thank you for the plan? It's looking like a good plan. We recognise all the work that's gone into it, and we are very grateful to you for obviously reflecting the feedback that we've given. So I suppose going forward, it's more now a matter of tweaking and just refining process than in any other way about not agreeing with the plan. So it looks good, and particularly I like the what will success look like criteria, because it does start to put that framework on. So we'll just go through and we'll deal with the pre-agreed questions that we did in the pre-meet, and then we'll open it for discussion. So the first one is Andrew. Andrew, you've got some questions about page 26 and page 27.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to just concur with what Chair said. It is a well-structured plan. Just in terms of the slide 27 in the bottom right-hand corner, where I think you've done some canvassing of public opinion. I guess I had 2 questions there. The first one was, what's the sample size? And secondly, but perhaps more important, how do you feel, Philip, about 50% of the community not being strong advocates of the work that the police do?
Got him. Thank you. There's obviously 2 separate questions. I'm going to ask Neil Tipton if he could give us a rundown on the sample size and where it came from, etc.
In terms of the sample size, I presume you're referring to the Victims Commissioner's survey. Is that correct?
It's the one in the bottom right-hand corner, the pie graph, where you're asking members of the public on their confidence levels of Warwickshire Police.
Neil, just to add some detail to that, on page 26, paragraph 2, line 2, you make reference to a 10,000 person survey, and we were impressed if there's a survey gone out which has engaged 10,000 people. So if you could add that into your answer as well, please.
Yes, my misunderstanding. I wasn't sure whether you're referring to page 26 and 27 of the plan or in the pack. So yes, the 10,000 survey is exactly that. It was 10,000 people across Warwickshire. We paid for a market research company to do that on our behalf, and the intention and the reality of that was that it was split geographically and demographically, so that we had a representative sample from across the county. So it is 10,000 people. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not trying to be awkward. Is that 10,000 people that replied, were participated actively in the survey? So this pie graph represents the views of 10,000 people.
Yes.
Okay, if I just attempt to answer your second question, which was about strongly agree, etc. I mean, I was quite pleased that 78% either strongly have confidence in Warwickshire Police or tend to agree they've got confidence in Warwickshire Police. That's 78%. I'd like to see the figures higher, of course, and that is one of the challenges we've actually set out in the plan to improve confidence in Warwickshire Police. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, thank you for that. I mean, I think this is all about interpretation, isn't it, of the data? And I think for what is effectively a service that the public pay for, one could draw the conclusion that people who fall into the tend to agree are apathetic, or I would expect people to be more affirmative, and I'm not sure that is a vote of confidence.
Yeah, I understand your point. I mean, I was also quite pleased to see that actually only 9% either tended to disagree or strongly disagreed. So to get a figure of over 90% that are not disagreeing or if you like, haven't got confidence, I think compared to other forces is about average.
Okay, thank you. Well, can we just leave that one with you, Philip? That the panel, when we were looking at that statistic, noted the 50% of people that strongly agree, and we celebrate that. But then we were interested that there were 50% of people who didn't fall into that category. And you are aware of that, and you set a strategic priority, so that's great. The next one we take to is page 36 in the papers. This is where it gets confusing again, isn't it? Which is on the plan itself, page 16 of 36. Claire.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I noted under violence against women and girls, the third paragraph down, there's a reference to misogyny. So it says we must also ensure that misogyny has no place within the police, criminal justice agencies or wider society as a whole. Confidence in policing and the way it tackles issues of misogyny in its own workforce need to be restored. I'd like a bit more information on where this has come from. So how does it feed into the everyday policing through the PCC role? And what exactly does misogyny in the workforce mean? And how does the PCC's office intend to have a handle in tackling that?
I'll make my comments, and it may be the Chief Constable might like, because it's not my workforce, it's her workforce. What we need to do is see fairness in the workplace, and police force, like anywhere else, reflects society as a whole, and I think there is no doubt that misogyny has increased, and that is not a good thing in any sphere of work or social or anywhere else. So we wanted to get it in the plan that there will be monitoring of this issue and if you like, objectives to reduce it, and things put in place to make it sort of whistleblowing type things, and to try and get it reduced. But Debbie, do you want to say anything on that?
Thank you. Yes, I welcome the Commissioner putting this in the plan to hold us to account around sort of the internal workforce. So nationally, you've all seen there's a lot of debate around violence against women and girls, misogyny, conducts and behaviour and standards in officers, which I'll talk about later when I address the panel. It's extremely important that we've got really high internal standards, and actually everybody can come to work, be themselves without fear of any sort of disproportionality or any inference from that. So I really welcome the Commissioner putting this in the plan and ensuring that we do maintain extremely high standards internally and externally.
I'm quite pleased to hear that it's been recognised that that is something that needs to be looked at. Being female, I'm not well, I have had my own experiences in misogynistic behaviour shown towards me, but I'm just going to put one out there for the girls on a lighter note. Can we have more ladies' toilets at Leetwood, please? Because it was a bit of a struggle last time I went up there. There was a queue.
Okay, thank you much indeed. It's interesting, isn't it, that we should be sitting here in 2021 and we should still be talking about extreme prejudice within the organisation after 25, 30 years of discussions about institutional racism and behaviours. So I suppose it's a useful reminder, isn't it, that you can never take your eye off the ball. And accepting national events, I'm sure that anybody living in Warwickshire would be hugely alarmed to find there was any element of misogynistic behaviour going on anywhere in Warwickshire Police. So your leadership is noted and thanked, Chief Constable. Okay, right. Well, that concludes the detailed discussions we've got about the plan. However, we would like to talk about performance. And Andy, you've got some views.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, it was great to see the priorities with a kind of success section after each of them. Really welcome that in the plan. It's really clear in terms of some of the ambition in there and the aspiration around achieving success. I think what was missing for us was some real measures around how that success could be measured, how it would be obvious as we go through the life of the plan, and then at the end of the plan, how we can actually demonstrate that the plan's been successful. So I know this is something that it's in the remit of the Performance and Planning Group in terms of monitoring the performance of the plan over time, and it would be really good if we can work together in terms of developing what those measures should be so that we can actually deliver against that function as a working group. So we have a proposed motion, if I can share that. So there's a proposal. The motion is the proposal to set up a task and finish group to assist the OPCC in developing the performance framework, which will be informed by a RAC assessment of the current plan as it reaches the end of its shelf life, and then an analysis to shape relevant targets and measures against the proposed measures of success in the new plan. And these need to be relevant and as a result of the work of the PCC.
That's it. Did you have a concluding date for that group?
And this could be reported to the panel on the meeting of the 22nd of January 2022. So that's our next meeting.
Yeah, I do beg your pardon. So we have a situation where you're making a recommendation to the group or moving a motion to the group that we form a working group just to look at how we could take some of those strategic priorities and turn them into a more detailed delivery plan that focus on the areas of priority. Members, do we have anybody that wants to second that in terms of process?
So, can we see what the PCC thinks of that as an idea? Because we can only work with him if he wishes to work with us.
That's a very good point here. Philip, always helpful to have you.
I think you all know that it's my duty to hold Warwickshire Police to account, not the panels, you know that. But it is your duty to hold me to account. So I think if that helps in that process, I have no objection to a working group being set up. It may not be the final arbiter in how we hold the force to account. That's my job to do that. But I think it would help in developing some ideas and, if you like, some KPIs or measures of outcomes and performance. I think that would be helpful. I would certainly offer probably David Patterson, who, as you know, helps you out with your performance working group, to join that group, to perhaps be able to set some parameters where who's responsible for what and those sorts of things. But I have no objection, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Have you got anything to say in response to the Commission before we move it formally to a vote?
No, just welcome the input from David Patterson. Good.
Does anybody else want to say anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'll second the motion.
You'll second the motion.
I'd like to speak. Thank
Oh,
you.
right, excellent. Thank you, Derek. Christopher, you're waving. Later? Okay. Does anybody else wish to make any observations about the working group and the creation of the working group? No? Okay. Well, should we move that to a vote then? So, all those in favour of Andy's proposal that we do a task and finish group, which will report by the 27th of January, working in partnership with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office, with a view to identifying some performance indicators that would sit under the high-level strategic ambitions that are laid out. All those in favour? Okay, thank you very much indeed. And that's unanimous from all those present, so thank you very much indeed. Okay, right, so working group fixed, and we'll be in touch, John, with some meetings and some arrangements, how we do that. And David will let you know, if you could let John know of any dates you wouldn't be available, if you've got any holidays booked. Polly?
We'll confirm who from our office can support it. You might get more than one of us.
Fabulous. Okay, well, yeah, well, obviously we've got Christmas coming up, so if we can make sure we get some dates in the diary to get good availability, then that'll be great. Okay, thank you, members, and then once we've agreed those dates, obviously John will contact everybody and see who wants to be part of that group moving forward. Christopher?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, just continue on the performance issue with my particular hat of the budget working group. As this is a sort of public forum, the Evolve programme we now know is moved considerably further forward from where we were before. We've come to a number of agreements. Can we just have sort of confirmation, Philip, that you are absolutely comfortable that the programme will be delivered by the 31st of March, and we will therefore be operating on our new system from that date?
I don't want to sort of steal the Chief Constable's sandwiches, because I know she's going to talk about Evolve. But at the moment, I'm happy. We're on course to finish this process by the end of March next year.
Thank you very much indeed. Ian?
And could I also say thank you for this plan. There's a lot of good detail to my mind, and I think most of us here, it aims for all the right things. I'm very pleased to hear that a bit more target setting work will happen in due course. I wanted to pick up on two bits. One will be no surprise to you about carbon footprint, in that it may not be just setting the targets enough, that there needs to be more of a strategy, what are the areas and so on. So there are two parts to this question. One is on that, will there be more of a strategy? Will there be a strategy which sets out the various areas of policing work in terms of reducing the carbon footprint? And then the other, okay, that one first.
Thank you, Ian. I'm not surprised by the question. It is referred to carbon, obviously, emission reduction in the plan. There's a lot of detailed work going on at the moment, because I suspect most of our carbon emissions come from our estate, from our buildings. There's an estates review going on, which is due to report, I think, before Christmas, and then we should be looking at what items and the conclusions of that report to put in place. But I am certainly asking questions that, like, are we looking at putting some solar panels on all the roofs we've got across Warwickshire? Are we looking at replacing boilers that are inefficient? Are we looking at our fleet and the type of cars that the police use? The answer is yes to all those questions, insulation and other things to try and reduce the carbon footprint. And, you know, I haven't put down a target for it, because we don't really know what our emissions are at the moment. So I think the first stage is to find out what our emissions are, or where they sit, and where they, if we can try and quantify the volume, would be helpful. But yeah, we're all aware of what went on in Glasgow for the last couple of weeks, and I think Warwickshire Police and myself, as the owner of the properties, we need to play our part.
That's excellent to hear. You didn't say a time when you would be able to tell us what this plan would be. If you can't, that's a shame, but it would be great to have that. The other bit I was looking at was it's good that the focus is on violence against women and girls. There's a lot that's important there, particularly with domestic abuse at the minute. I'm just going to ask one sentence, which you said, I will support the formulation of a new county-wide strategy to coordinate activity across all relevant agencies. Can you tell us a bit more about that strategy? And again, a timeline, please.
This is just violence against women and girls. Yep, there is a board in Warwickshire, the Violence Against Women and Girls Board, which does bring together all partners and all agencies in Warwickshire that can possibly have a beneficial effect on this, and we take part in it. It's administered, I think it's run by the County Council, and yes it is, they're nodding behind, but it is an agenda we want to be very much part of, and plainly we want Warwickshire Police and the County Council and others to play a big part in producing a strategy, but also some outcomes from it that will make it safer for our women and girls, either in the home or on the street. Okay. Yep, I think Polly wants to add to that.
Just to help out with the timeline question, the strategy, I understand, is about to be refreshed, and I know a working group is currently being convened, so I would like to think that they will turn something out in the next few months.
Great, thank you for both of those.
Okay, thank you. Members, does anybody else have any comments on the Police and Crime Plan? Claire?
It was just a follow-on from that one on page 8 of 36. There are the boxes where we are looking at box number 3, keep people safe from people safe and reduce harm, shared outcomes. Women and girls are protected from violence, vulnerable people are safeguarded, and there is a sustained reduction in the numbers of people killed and seriously injured on our roads. Now, we've spoken about the roads issue previously, because we have the multi-agency approach on that, with the county highways responsible for designing roads to be safe or adding things in at a later date, etc., which the PCC's office isn't responsible for. And it's again, there are sort of cross-cutting themes, sitting with two hats on, county and borough. It's difficult sometimes to get things done through the county where we know it would make a tangible difference to road safety. So that's something that I do need to reiterate. But also, where it says areas of focus, under the vulnerabilities aspect, there's mental health, hate crime and homelessness. Now, homelessness also falls under my portfolio as housing and communities portfolio holder here at Nuneaton and Bedworth. And is that approach going to be a joint approach as well through working groups, etc., because it is the districts and boroughs' responsibility to help with homelessness. So I just wondered how the PCC's office is fitting in with the homelessness strategies of the districts and boroughs.
Okay, I'll answer them in the order you asked them. So, road safety, as you know, I do chair the Warwickshire Road Safety Partnership, which has the Highway Authority, it has the police, it has Highways England, and other organisations that really have an interest in road safety. So, I want to get that doing more, working more, get more money into it. It's had a good birth and is now sort of moving into its adult or adolescent years, should I say, whereby it's beginning to produce some real improvements to those road users, and of course pedestrians and bikers and people on horses, etc., across the road. So that is really important, and that's why it's one of the three main areas of focus under the keep people safe and reduce harm heading. The other one is the one before it, is vulnerability. I mean, that's a huge topic. Plainly, we have the mental health partnership represented on the Warwickshire Blue Light Collaboration Board, which I chair, with some successes. We've got the triage scheme going on, and we're trying to work out how police and other organisations like ambulance and indeed fire and rescue can work with the Mental Health Trust, both sort of operationally to make sure that anyone who does have mental health problems is properly dealt with. And of course there are schemes whereby mental health nurses can come into our custody suites. And, you know, it's a huge topic. And hate crime is also important. And plainly homelessness. I think the districts and boroughs have made a really good start to tackle homelessness, which we totally support and encourage. In Stratford, the new Fred Winter Centre is about to open. Where's Chris? Any minute now, isn't it? Before Christmas, I think. Which is specifically designed to accommodate homelessness. And we will make sure that, you know, any scheme or project in Warwickshire is properly supported by all the partners. If I can do that, I will do that. Thank you.
Just to say thanks for that, Philip. It's good to know that it's all on everybody's radar, and I think a more cohesive approach through the different service providers is the only way we're going to actually tackle all of these things and get a resolution.
Thank you, members. Does anybody else have any views before we move to a resolution to agree the plan? So, no, I can't see anybody. Caroline, can you just advise us then on the process by which we agree or adopt the plan?
Thank you, Chair. It's not for the panel to adopt the plan. Sorry, I'm struggling with the chair. It's for this panel to review it and then to make report or recommendations on the draft to the Commissioner. So that's what this panel is here for, and obviously there's been some comment already in this meeting. I don't know, Chair, whether you feel that you'd want to follow up formally in writing with a formal report following the session, setting out comments you've got on the draft plan.
Yeah, I mean, Philip will do that. We regularly exchange on important issues, don't we? So we'll follow it up with a letter that just summarises the views. But thank you for your help and support with our proposals.
All I would ask, Chairman, if you could do that as soon as possible, because I don't want to delay getting this out, and it gets all mixed up with Christmas and then the budget and everything else. So we're going to try and get it out as soon as we can.
Philip, we'll get that done. As I look at Caroline, when will we get that letter drafted and done?
This week.
This week, before Friday, is that okay? Okay, thank you much indeed. And just one from me. You know, the world's moving on so quickly, and you talk about the visioning of 2025 in the plan and a whole series of national interventions. I don't know whether there's any help that your office could give the plan, just to give us a headline brief on the important pieces of legislation that are coming forward. Because while we rely on the good services of John and the county within the structure that supports the panel, there's a lot going on at the moment that we're not, I feel, adequately cited on the national agenda around crime reduction and community safety.
I mean, at the moment, I think it's on committee stage in the House of Lords, is the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill, which is a huge bill. It's what's called a Christmas tree bill. In other words, lots of items have been added to it as it goes through. There are some amendments being made. Some are being carried, some aren't. We need to wait out what those is. There are some very important principles in that bill. For example, the criminalisation of trespass and other things that will make a significant difference to us here, how we operate the law.
Okay, well, thanks, Philip. Well, we look forward to anything that your office could do to help us improve our background knowledge as we move forward. Right, so thank you then. Members, can I take it then that we're all agreed with the plan and happy to move forward? Thank you very much indeed. Right, so that takes us on to agenda item 2.2, which is the Gypsy and Roma Traveller report. But can I just bring forward 2.3, because we've only got one comment about the performance report, and then we'll put performance to bed in the discussions and go on to the Gypsy and Traveller items. So, members, if I can just take you forward to agenda item 2.3, the performance accountability meeting and the performance papers in in the pack in front of us. And referencing the pages, please, Ian, you have a question?
I do, and there are about 4 types of reference I can give. In our pack, it's 69 and 70, and it's point 3, which then goes to point 24. Not quite sure how that works. And it's got total recorded crime. The proportion of action taken outcomes for total reported crime was 9%. Now, clearly, I'm sure all of us would wish it was much higher than that. And particularly at the beginning of the next page, it says for domestic abuse, outcome 16, which is where I believe it says evidential difficulties. So like the victim withdrawing, not engaging fully, prevents further action, was at 66%. So if I've understood that right, when there's reported domestic abuse, 2/3 of the time, no further actions taken because of difficulties going forwards there. And I think Q3 is something that you asked the Chief Constable, which was, what are the drivers that affect the relatively low action taken rates for domestic abuse and the contributory high outcome 16 rates, and what action is to be taken to improve this position? So I don't know whether it's for you to answer or the Chief Constable.
Shall I make a stab at this? This is really important. It is something we talk about almost weekly between my office and the force. Of course, reported crimes are not all crimes. Some of them are allegations, so that is a significant part of it. But I think it's important that all allegations are listened to and professionally investigated, and if needed, a prosecution should be mounted. So I'm not anti-prosecutions. But interestingly, last time I went to what we call our harm hub, which is where quite a lot of the sort of victim management goes on, there was one lady who will remain nameless who'd reported 39 abuses of domestic abuse within a month. Now that goes down as 39 crimes. So, you know, that you're not going to get 39 prosecutions there. So the figures need to be tempered with what actually happens on the ground. I'll be honest, I'm not an expert, having never been a detective, but I am going to ask our Chief Constable for a comment, please.
Thank you, Philip. Absolutely, so domestic abuse is one of those horrendous crimes where we need to constantly encourage victims to report and to report early within their experiences. So it's often that, and I'll say women because it is generally women, although we do have male individuals that are victims of domestic abuse as well. But it's really important that actually often a victim will experience a whole host of incidents, whether they be coercive control, whether they be sexual violence or violence, before they have the confidence to come forward and report to the police. So it's really important that we do everything we can to encourage early reporting, and we do nothing to prevent or any adverse inference that stops individuals feeling confident enough to do that. It is fair to say it's been very difficult, particularly through the COVID pandemic, to keep victims and witnesses on board through the criminal justice processes. And you know, I think, you know, we do have to acknowledge that often victims will contact us at the time of crisis, and then when you're able to start to put measures in place in order to support victims, then sometimes they don't want to, for their own reasons, and a variety of reasons, don't want to continue with that journey. We need to make sure that we're there to support with our colleagues and the wider partnerships and encourage victims to go down that route. There are occasions when we do just take criminal proceedings against the wishes of a victim, depending on the severity and the threat levels that are involved and their vulnerability. But actually we work really hard in partnership with victims to ensure that we get the best outcomes. The figures are not ones that we are seeking to celebrate. You know, we want to make sure that we support victims more, that we do get people through the criminal justice process. But one of the most important things for me is that we get the victims' code journey right. Because if we get the victims' code journey right, then we are more likely to keep those victims and witnesses within the process. But for a variety of reasons, as you all know, it's not always a criminal outcome that victims are after.
Thank you very much for that. Obviously, you're taking it really seriously, which is really important. If I can just ask a follow-up, you've clearly engaged a lot with this issue. You mentioned something like victim code journey. Can you explain that to lay people? And then the other part of the question is that is there good practice elsewhere that you're thinking we need to do more of that here?
Thank you. Yes, apologies. So the victims code journey is around every victim has a statutory right. We have a responsibility to make sure that we uphold those rights for victims. So around timely updates, how a victim wants to be updated, about a victim personal statement and how they describe the incident and the impact on them as individuals, and that's read out in court, and also around special measures, so actually how we support victim screens, etc. So there's a number of different statutory rights that actually we as the police investigating need to make sure that we uphold victims' rights. So that's the Victims Code journey. That was it went out in consultation, and actually the new code came into statutory being in April this year. So we're working through that with Crown Prosecution Service colleagues who also have got some responsibilities under the Victims Code. And that's all about making sure that victims are treated with dignity and respect through the whole process. So yeah, we are monitoring that to make sure that we do what we need to in order to support victims. Apologies, I can't remember the second question.
Any good practice elsewhere?
Yes, thank you. So obviously we work in partnership with our regional forces and nationally. So we're part of the National Vulnerability Group. So we are constantly looking at how we can improve our services. We are fortunate in the West Midlands because the Crown Prosecution Service, Crown Prosecutor is the national lead for violence against women, including domestic abuse and RASO, so rape and serious sexual offences. So we work very closely with not only police colleagues and council colleagues across the country, but also with the CPS.
Thank you, and best of luck improving the situation.
Thank you, Ian. So just from my understanding, Commissioner, for that opening sentence on paragraph 23, outcomes, total recorded crime, where it says in September the proportion of action taken for outcomes for total recorded crime was at 9%. Clearly I misread, it's on page 69 of the document pack, or page 9 of 14 of the performance report pack. It's an interesting, I'm conscious that it said this is a public document, and depending on how you read that statement, it could be misinterpreted to say that no action is taken on 91% of reported crimes, which clearly isn't right. So that statement, therefore, then is a specific statement about the month of September, as opposed to a statement generally that at September no action was taken on 91% of other crimes.
I haven't written every word on this paper, as you'll agree, or you will understand. Dave, do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I can do. I think the first thing is just to put the paper into context. This paper is prepared on the back of the Force Performance Summary. So the reference to paragraph 24 corresponds to the slide in the actual performance report. So that's the first thing, so that's why it's there. In terms of the action taken rate for September, it was 9%. There are charts within the performance report itself which demonstrates the highs and the lows and gives further explanation for it. The purpose of this report is just to provide an example or demonstration of the holding to account arrangements which the Commissioner provides in terms of the Chief Constable. But we also have the Planning and Performance Working Group, and it's their opportunity to go through this in greater depth. And I think Mr Davis is due to report to the panel on the findings of the meeting that we had last Wednesday, I think it was.
Right, thank you. So recognising this paper is in the public environment, having been published, then we can confirm that action is being taken in those other 91% of reported crimes for total recorded crime.
Yes, previously presented to the working group and the panel the outcomes paper. As you can appreciate, it is a very complicated area of business, quite esoteric, and there are 22 two codes, I think, for outcomes relating to the investigation and the outcome at the end of the day. But in terms of action taken, I think it's codes 128-5, which is not only charges, but it's also cautions, and it's also out-of-court disposals, etc., etc. I'm happy to answer questions, but it is quite complicated, and I think there's danger of actually creating more confusion than clarity on these issues.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. As long as we're not just saying that we're actioning 9%, which obviously would be a major efficiency concern. Anyway, right. Anybody else, any views on the performance report before we go back to the Gypsy Traveller in Rome agenda paper? Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on something that isn't in the report, and it's an area of priority for the working group, which is around 101 communications. And we met last week and we were looking at the performance around abandonment of calls, and just wondered if there was an opportunity for the Commissioner just to make a comment on the high level of abandonment of calls currently, and then steps to kind of reduce that abandonment.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, this is important. This is the police force's shop window, if you like. This is where a lot of people will come into contact with the police when they're reporting a crime or an incident or some bit of intelligence. It does go up and down, the 101, if you like, the figure, the performance figures go up and down from week to week. So it's a bit dangerous just to look at a week. There have been problems during the COVID. It is an area where, plainly, you get a lot of people very close to each other in the same buildings. There are no windows in our OCC either, so that was difficult to get a throughput of air. So, and you know, if one person gets pinged, a whole lot of other people have to isolate, and you know all the things that you would have come across elsewhere. It is really important. What I do say, if I would ask this question anywhere, is that it's the same people who answer the 999. Calls who answer the 101. We don't have the resource to have people just, you know, specifically for one or other of those phone lines. So I've had calls to ring 101 at various times. Sometimes you wait longer than others. I totally accept that. But there is the development of single online home, which I'm pleased to see, which is where you can report a crime or an incident online. That is being used more and more, but not as much as we'd like, but it is being used by our public more and more. So we are trying to sell that as a way not only of reporting crime, but reducing pressure on 101, where somebody can only report a crime if they're not online. So yeah, it's really important. I mean, I don't want to keep asking Debbie, but I know, has looked into this in a lot of depth recently. Have you got any comment on that?
Yes, thank you, Philip. So I was going to cover it when I talked to the panel later on today, but actually the abandoned calls needs to be seen in context to the demand on the nines and the performance on the nines and what comes through, because unfortunately what we do know is people will dial 101. If you don't answer quick enough, then actually they often hang up and then ring on the nines and create additional pressures on our nines emergency calls. So there is no national target in relation to 101s. Our priority has to be the nines, as you'd appreciate that is actually when we are dealing with life at risk scenarios, but I'm happy to cover it in more detail when I address the panel in a bit.
Thanks. Just to say, and as a working group, we said we'd continue to monitor it as well as one of our priorities. So yeah, it would be helpful to get any further context.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Any more questions on the performance paper? Christopher?
Just a comment, really. I mean, I think everybody understands why 101 is not 999, and are aware that the number not only exists, but I think there is a concern, given the abandoned calls, etc., that probably the perception is far greater than the problem, with people actually saying there's no point in 101 because nobody answers the telephone type response. Now, clearly, a significant number of people are calling, and a significant, well, a vast proportion of those aren't being answered on a timely basis. But I think there is a perception issue, and it's one that's come up actually in 5 of my last county council meetings, where I've had to work quite hard to impress on members of those meetings, attending those meetings, to use 101 as a service. And there's quite a strong pushback because of the delay and whatever. So I think there is an opportunity somewhere to, and I don't know how to do it because it's not my area of expertise, but to actually push the importance of 101 as a reporting facility. And I do know from one of my local SNT teams who was able to give me chapter and verse on the number of calls that come in and relating to a particular incident or ongoing incident, where that information was coming through from the 101 database through to the SNT team. And I think that was really refreshing. Sadly, I couldn't repeat much of that in public because it was obviously something that was a little bit sensitive. But I think if there are examples where the benefits of 101, and more importantly, the benefits of reporting on 101, either on the website or hanging on to that call, however boring it may be, does reap benefits and does provide intelligence which enables the police to respond to incidents, whether they be civil or criminal, speeding or otherwise. And it's a very valuable resource that you need to promote. And I just think promotion of it would be a good thinking how to promote it might be a good, worthwhile of somebody's time.
Thank you. So I don't disagree with that at all. I think you're right in the perception that it's a real issue is actually not necessarily the reality. So the average wait time for 101s this week, and it is dangerous looking at it weekly because it does vary depending on what's going on around the nines, public concerns, etc. But the average this week was 2 minutes. Last week it was 1 minute. And when you're looking at that, so we have on average 3,500 calls a week on the 101, plus about 1,800 calls on the nines. Actually, 2 minutes, I would say, is not actually a long time, albeit that may feel a long time if somebody's waiting on the phone. We are constantly pushing out communications around the 101 number. We do encourage people to report online for non-emergency matters, so single online home. Certainly there's the opportunity Operation Snap, people can upload dangerous driving or incidents on dash cams, etc. So we're constantly pushing that as a means of communication, but do recognise not all members of the public do actually want to contact us via online methods. So we have done a survey recently, I haven't got the findings yet, around actually how do members of the public within Warwickshire want to contact their police force, and then we can work that through as to what that looks like. So I do think actually the reality is probably not as bad as the perception around it, but it does vary week on week.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? No? Commissioner, I'm surprised you've been ringing 101. I always thought the Commissioner had a back phone and you could shine a light and somebody would be there. Okay. Right, members, let's go to agenda item 2.2 then, which is the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller report. Philip, are you presenting or is Chris?
This is a good bit of work by Chris Lloyd, who's sitting behind me, but I'm very happy to introduce it. This is an issue that is of great concern to various sections of our community when they have been impinged upon by an unauthorised Gypsy Roma traveller encampment in their neck of the woods. So it is taken with great seriousness. This, I think, is a good report. I think it sets out expectations. I think this is not going to be solved overnight. I am going to ask Chris to say a few words because he is what I call the subject matter expert, as indeed is Martin Rowan Clark, who I'm sure you're aware is our liaison, Gypsy Traveller liaison officer. But it's complicated. I did set out, and with agreement from all the agencies, the protocol, which I believe has increased, or rather reduced, the time that some of these unauthorised encampments are dealt with by improving the process and partnership working. Chris does make a point about, of which you well know, Mr. Chairman, the stopover place up up near Harts Hill, not used very much, but it's important that it's there, because that is something that the police can say, well, you've got the stopover place. If you don't use it, they can be moved off quite a bit quicker. So that's important. And as it says in here, there is another site being worked on in the south of the county, which will also help the process be shortened and to cause as little effect or concern or anything else onto the settled community. So that's the introduction. Chris, do you want to say, don't read it out word for word, but any other points?
That's a bit of an omen, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry. Off to a flyer. First of all, in terms of Martin Rowan Clark, I'm his biggest fan, and I absolutely defer to him. He's the expert, not myself. But yeah, can I just highlight some points, I think, from the report, just hopefully for your assistance. The first thing I would say is that I'd really encourage you to read the statutory guidance, which I referred to in the second paragraph. I had a refresh on that this morning, and it's not a big, heavy read, but I think it's a good read. If you've got genuine interest in this topic and the direction we're going, it's really useful to have a good look at. The next few points, I'm not a lecturer in law, I'm not a law expert, but I'm going to attempt to just highlight to you the key points of the new proposed legislation, which is Section 60, which effectively criminalises civil trespass. But if you look at the legislation, it introduces some new words, and basically for the offence to be made out, police officers have to be satisfied that significant, and that's a really important word, significant damage, disruption or distress is occurring or has occurred in relation to the unauthorised encampment. Now within the draft guidance, the word significant is defined quite comprehensively, but at the end of the day it is a police officer's decision to determine whether or not significant is made out. If it's not made out, the offence is not made out, and those on the ground making decisions basically have to go to, dare I call it, the old offence under Section 61, which is still very, very useful, very powerful. The other broad observation I'd make is that generally speaking, when travellers are asked to move off and not return, the legislation previously refers to 3 months. We now go up to 12 months before persons or vehicles can potentially return. And also, there has been problems in the past whereby we've had encampments on the highway. That's all now been tidied up, and there's no sort of confusion anymore about the highway. The legislation covers that, so it's comprehensive, if you like. The highway is no longer a way in which travellers can sort of evade the legislation. Previously, they've been able to do that. Another one, which Martin Rowan Clark asked me to emphasise, is that the new legislation, Section 60, refers to persons aged over 18 years of age. Quite often within unauthorised encampments, there are clearly lots of children, but there are young adults there with vehicles and caravans. As and when this becomes legislation, Martin was keen for you all to understand that it only relates to persons aged over 18. The next 2 points I think are really important to emphasise. We understand, we get it, if you like, that when an unauthorised encampment takes place, all eyes turn towards the police. But the reality is this is not solely a policing issue. This is a partnership issue. And indeed, if you look at the draft guidance and other bits of guidance that are available in terms of unauthorised encampments, The police are referred to as the support act, if you like. It is the local authority who is the lead agency in terms of looking at these problems and finding longer-term resolutions. Now, I know that is complex and that is difficult, but that is what the law and the guidance is saying, and I just share that with you. Very briefly, as you go through the guidance, and I think I've tried to highlight this in my report, this legislation, when it becomes law and is going to be available, is going to be useful in the main, but it's also got the potential to be emotive, and therefore justification, proportionality, legality, use of the statute can only be done as an absolute necessity. To quote the draft guidance, each case must be looked at on its own merits. And finally, just to wrap up a couple of points. Yes, unauthorised encampments are difficult, they're challenging, and in one sense, no one wants them. But we have a travelling community that has been around for centuries and come with their own cultures and attitudes, which can be challenging. But if we're going to get ahead of the curve on this, we do need to look at the availability of land, in the near term, in the longer term, temporary stopping, negotiated stopping. We need to have dialogue on that and progression. I think I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. It's an interesting situation, isn't it? All but 2 members of this panel are elected representatives who have much personal experience in terms of community issues arising out of unlawful encampments. So it's going to be an interesting debate, I think. Members, we need to remind ourselves that we are here to hold the PCC to account and not the Chief Constable before we get into any too direct questions, and I throw that open. I would just ask for clarification about Martin Rowan Clark. So you've mentioned him in the report. Now, we all know Martin because he comes out and he's on the ground and he is a great source of help and support and indeed mediation, and clearly has a respect from all sides, which is fundamentally important in negotiations. But we're surprised to find that Martin is operating at a national level as well. Can I just ask for some clarification as to where Martin's role sits? Because I understand it, he's a member of the Warwickshire County Council Community Safety Team, but if he is also representing Warwickshire on a national level, who is informing and guiding him in terms of his engagement?
Can I answer that? I mean, he's an employee of Warwickshire Police, not the County Council. He works very closely with the County Council Community Safety team. As far as the national work, I think he is just on a national group that have been advising Home Office officials on the implementation of this Act where it impinges on unauthorised encampments. He doesn't work for the Home Office or anything. It's a part-time post as an expert to put some knowledge into this process while it's going through Parliament.
So it's just basically an advisory group that don't operate in terms of any politicking or advocacy. They're just advising. Because clearly, I mean, it's great to have borderless organisations where anybody can represent if they're the expert, but it's just making sure that everything's tied up. Because the one thing that, as I'm sure will come out of the questions we ask, it feels as though this agenda needs a lead. And it doesn't feel amongst the elected members as though that lead is clear. So maybe, Commissioner, there might be a question coming back to you for help and support at the end around that agenda. So, members, questions? Claire and John. So Claire, John, and then Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I did read with interest this briefing note, and one of the things I did pick up was what the Chair's already mentioned about Martin Rowan Clark operating as a government advisor. I was quite sort of taken aback by that. I was slightly disappointed with the tone of the report, shall we say, because there was nothing about community impact. And we, as elected members, I mean, myself personally, I've been out on the ground when there have been traveller encampments trying to set up. I've tried to disrupt that process. In one instance, I was actually told by the police on the ground if I didn't move and allow them onto our park, I would be arrested for breach of the peace. So I had to step aside. The encampment came on. It caused significant issues within the local area, and the council was left picking up a significant cleaning bill. And I don't know how that can be reconciled within the process that we're looking at, because I'm not confident that that will change with the new legislation. It kind of feels like the stall is being set out for things not to change. And I would like some clarity going forwards. We know what's happened in the past, but I'd like to know that going forwards, what the view is going to be through the PCC's office and the wider role of the police with gypsy and traveller unauthorised encampments, and with the mention of the word significant. Well, what is significant to one person is not significant to another. But if you've got an unauthorised encampment pitching up literally on your doorstep and people using your local park as a toilet, that is significant to that person. So how do we reconcile that moving forwards, I think, is one of the things I'd like to get some more clarity on. I mean, I have blue penned all over this report because there's things in it as well about the lack of a suitable housing. Well, again, housing and communities, my portfolio. I know that the last time we had unauthorised encampments, we offered housing. It was flatly refused. We have tried to get the old recite up and running. Didn't happen, not interested, quite happy on wherever it is that they're pitching up and moving from one place to the next. We've done the tolerated stays, and we agreed particular numbers would be able to stay on X area, and it was just out of control. Within 24 hours, everything went out the window. So I'm really interested in how this is going to move forward. Again, looking at another part of this report, where it talks about the number of encampments have dropped. There's two fundamental things that have not been acknowledged in this report. And again, I'll kind of address it to yourself through Philip as the PCC. But there's nothing in here about the reduction due to the injunction that was brought in through Nuneaton and Bedworth. Now, Nuneaton and Bedworth had probably about an 18-month period where it was one encampment after the next, after the next, after the next. And eventually, after a while, we did apply for a High Court injunction and we got it. So the number of encampments has dropped in part because of the fact that we now don't have one encampment after the next, because we injuncted on that as a council. And also COVID. There's not been a lot of travelling going on due to COVID, so that will also bring down the numbers. But on the flip side of that, I literally had a conversation with another councillor who got in touch with me on Sunday, because there's 22 unauthorised encampments in his particular area. That's Barnacle and Bulkington, and they are growing. So this is not an issue that's going away, and this is an issue that is causing significant problems within small local communities that feel like they are just being kind of swept aside. And I hope with the new legislation that's coming in, that isn't going to continue.
I mean, I think you've nicely demonstrated there, haven't you, your frustration at the situation, but your original question was around recognising community needs and dealing with community empowerment on that agenda. So, Chris, I don't know whether you've got anything you can say to us about how we can properly pick up the anxiety that sits amongst communities, and at the moment in some areas in Warwickshire it's causing attention directly with the travellers that obviously we all want to avoid.
I think two things. In one sense, I'm not here to speak on behalf of Martin Rowan Clark, but if he was here, I think he would tell you very comprehensively of the sensitivities that are taken into account when an authorised encampment is taking place. There is no taking of sides. It's dealt with on the facts and on the evidence. And as the councillor is saying, this is hugely emotive. And quite often, folks who are on, shall we say, the settled side of community, no matter what the police do, it will never be right. But I think if Martin Rowan Clark was here, he would be telling you the great deal of research and sensitivity that goes in to understanding everybody's needs and getting the encampment resolved as quickly as possible. Of that, I'm very confident. From my own perspective, sorry, Chair, I'm sat behind the scenes looking at the strategic overview, and that's what I've reported on. I'm not there on a day-to-day basis on the front line looking at this. I do rely on good liaison with Martin Rowan Clark, and I'm very confident to say he's leading a very good situation in terms of trying to resolve these encampments. I will say one more thing, if I may. Kirby Glebe Farm. The councillor referred to the injunction and so on and so forth. But the families who played the cat and mouse game, which I think led to that injunction, are now at Kirby Glebe Farm. And so there's another problem there.
I think it nicely demonstrates, doesn't it, the complexity and the challenge of dealing with this issue, you know, and there's a whole history around the Oldbury site or the Hartshill Hay site, depending on how you call it, and not only has it only been used once in 5 years, but there's been a huge degree of criminality taking place on that site with no travellers, so that itself demonstrates the challenge of finding solutions, which is why really the feeling of the panel today is one of we must come together as partners and find a resolution to this, because we cannot have a situation where provision is put in place and then criminality prevents that provision from being used. It's not an acceptable outcome. So John.
Yes, Chair. It's many years actually since I first met the then PC Rowan Clark, and I'm not at all surprised he now has a national role. His depth of understanding of the issues, and they are complex, and his sense of fairness and proportionality. We, of course, you know, as elected councillors, we're elected by our residents, and there is no doubt that residents have suffered enormously. Actual losses, damage, theft. But we also have to remember travellers do have rights to choose their lifestyle as well. But for example, we've had an encampment of over 70 caravans. And when I say that it's part of their way of life that they don't have toilets inside the caravans, you can see why the neighbouring residents would be have a genuine grievance. On another occasion, I witnessed myself a park with 20 caravans. I was down there at midnight when four-wheel drive vehicles were being driven around the park at high speed. And I've had residents send me videos of children pulling all the plants out of their front gardens. You know, there are some very serious issues which residents of Warwickshire are fully entitled to be demanding some action. Now, I understand that the law going through Parliament, the section on travellers, is not contested, and the reason it's been delayed in Parliament is because of other sections of the Act. But when we move forward here, one thing I would pick up on is the phrase traveller community. I don't think there is a traveller community. There are lots of different communities. Some of the travellers that have stopped in my area have stayed for a few days, have been no trouble to anyone, have cleared up all of their mess, and when they left, you would never know they've been, and they come every couple of years, and none of the neighbours have any complaints at all. So it's being tuned into particular excessive situations. Now, the key here is partnership between a lot of different public authorities and, of course, private landowners. And one of the difficulties of a partnership is that every partner has to play their part. They have to understand what it is, they have to agree to it, and above all, they have to do it. And the last time I asked for a list of where the travellers' sites were in the county, and this has been important because when landowners have used the civil courts, and Warwick County Court in non-COVID days was only sitting 3 days a week, and where landowners have applied for court orders, the first thing the judge says is, well, where are the travellers' sites? And within the Warwick District Council area, there are none. The other 4 districts and boroughs of the county do have travellers' sites, some privately owned, some publicly owned, but clearly part of the solution must be ensuring that we do provide an alternative. And the report does refer to the Warwick District Council local plan, which does say that the Leamington Football Club will be given a new stadium and the old one become a caravan site. Now, the local plan was only approved by the Secretary of State because it had the right number of caravan pitches in the plan, but there is actually no date, and there has even been a dispute as to whether this is caravan sites for travellers or not. And it gets more complicated than that because the football club will be moving from Leamington to Warwick, and under Football Association rules, there's already a football club in Warwick. So, you know, it's even at that stage. The new stadium, as far as I'm aware, is unfunded, and I don't think you can really say that that's part of a strategy. What we need is, when you have a partnership of a lot of different public and private bodies, it does get cumbersome, it does get difficult, and you have to have everybody understanding the problem the same way and keep everyone moving together. And clearly there is more work needs doing there, and clearly there is.
Okay,
what I would say, just as a final point, though, is that if Parliament is criminalising something which is currently not criminal, then the police are going to need extra resources to do it, because we don't have anything really in Warwickshire that we can say, yes, take the police off of that. And I think that's a point that our panel should make. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, John. So, Commissioner, 2 explanations of the frustration with the world that we find ourselves in at the moment. I suppose one of the things that we talked about in the pre-meeting was about, we recognised your work on the Gypsy and Traveller Protocol prior to COVID. We recognise the excellent work you've done around the Road Safety Partnership in terms of pulling the partners together and sorting out strategic funding streams. And the panel, knowing that you are a busy man, didn't know whether there was any opportunity for you to offer partners support again and act as that anchor to bring people together to solve what are clearly challenging issues.
I think that's perfectly fair, and would probably be a good time once this bill becomes an act and becomes the law. I mean, it's really complicated, John. I pretty well agree with everything you said. You're all councillors here representing the county or your districts and boroughs. Ask them questions. Ask your officers questions. How many pitches have we got? How many have we got in our plan? Well, how are we going to accommodate this? But we live in a country where we have the rule of law, and this paper going back to the paper that Chris has, does actually set out the expectations of what the law says and what we can do. I'm like all of you councillors. I get lots of correspondence when there's myself, because I'm an elected politician as well, and it's not easy, and we have to manage expectations from our communities and our residents. But I think they want to see us doing something about it. A lot has been done in Warwickshire, a lot more than in many other areas. That I can promise you. And by the way, Martin Rowan Clark, he doesn't work for the government. He's just on a working group, and he might have spent 2 or 3 days, in the last year. He doesn't work for the government, but he is an acknowledged expert on it. And interestingly, I've got Leicestershire PCC and part of his office coming to see us in Warwickshire to talk about this. How do we deal with it? They want to see what we do that they don't. But it is a way of life. It is difficult. In my book, we want to make Warwickshire the most uncomfortable place for gypsy traveller roamers to come to. That's all I can say. But we have to do it within the law, and we have to make sure that our police force are alert to that law and can work within it. So a lot of this is going to be about setting expectations, John. And, we'll have to. That is something I think that is worth doing, and we will get partners together, I'm sure, in the near future.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Members, unless anybody's got any burning issues, I'm conscious of time. I'm conscious the Chief Constable is here, and it's a challenge, this paper, to move forward. So if Claire, I'm going to give you the last comment, but it has to be succinct, please, because I want to move the meeting forward to the Chief Constable.
One of the things that I'm very aware of through all of this and the discussions is all roads seem to lead to Martin Rowan Clark. Is there a succession plan? If COVID has taught us nothing, it should be we have to have succession plans. Is there a succession plan for Martin Rowan Clark's position and his knowledge leaving the organisation?
He's on the police staff establishment. It is a recognised role. If he was coming up to retirement or suddenly left, I'm sure arrangements will be made to appoint a replacement.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm always an easy touch, and Christopher is most upset that I've said no. So, Christopher, take the very last.
I'll be very brief. I think
please keep it succinct.
Firstly, I'd like everybody else like to thank Martin Rowan Clark for his contribution. You mentioned talking to Leicestershire PCC. I think that liaison is really, really important, particularly if there is evidence of traveller groups migrating from one police area to another, so that we are forewarned rather. And I'm not talking about those travellers who are benign and who wish to contribute and live their lifestyle. I'm talking about those who have left a trail of damage in other local authority areas or police areas who then arrive and repeat. That is really, really important. It's worrying that children are excluded because in my own ward, as Philip, you will know, children have been CCTV'd in shops assaulting people. They haven't been able to proceed with any further action because they've moved on before and they've been lost. But what I was going to say, my key point, and I'll be very brief, is the last group of travellers were approached by a team of the Chief Constable's officers. I was there, I witnessed it. Within about 5 minutes of the officers arriving, they were surrounded by what could be described as a very hostile environment. I could describe it otherwise. And in their own safety, it was in their best interest to withdraw. And they did. That community then had 5 days of people who then knew that they were immune because of the way they behaved from further action, and duly after the process took place, they did move on. But what that gave the impression was the light touch did not work. And that is a real problem because what it ended up with, as happened the previous time, there had to be a permanent police presence in the village at key points, including at one point, one of Chief Constable's inspectors parked in a place because of lack of resource. If you don't prevent the problem when it starts, you end up, A, with a very disgruntled community, but B, having spent significant additional resources. And I could also mention the helicopter that was used on a previous occasion to try and corral certain members of that group back onto their illegal campsite. What was the cost of that? So it isn't just a matter of identifying is it a significant problem.
Can you wind it up?
Yeah, it is the ongoing cost. If you don't stop it, nip it in the bud, you end up with a far greater requirement until eventually they move on.
Okay, thank you. Members, I would like to move on to the next agenda item. So, Philip, Do you have a closing comment to summarise?
I do. I mean, I think it's been an interesting debate. I think it's shown some of the complexities of it. I've spoken to Chris on that particular incident, as he knows before. That's what expectations is about. I'm concerned that 12 caravans turn up in Bishop's Hitchington on a bit of ground, and the local community will think, oh, trespass, it's a criminal offence, we can get them moved in the next hour. It's not like that. There has to be proportionality. It would need a huge amount of resource, and this is something that the senior officers and the Chief Constable are going to have to consider, how in Warwickshire we respond to those sorts of incidents. But it is being thought about, and we're working through the process. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And just to tidy this up finally then, will you come back to me with a view about how you feel that your office might move this debate forward, recognising the primacy that sits with the district and the principal council?
Yeah. I'm very happy to undertake to gather all our partners together again. And by the way, we had members of Parliament. We had it was in this very room, if I remember rightly, that we did it, and it was successful, and it has definitely improved the process. So it probably needs a refresh, especially in light of the new legislation.
Thank you, Commissioner. Right, members, I intend now to move on to agenda item 3, which is the Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel Annual Report. We did discuss this in the pre-meeting, and we agreed the report subject to a revision to the paragraph at page 81 and 82. In the pre-meeting, we said that final paragraph just needed to recognise that we had the discussion about the performance working group today, and that the Commissioner had accepted the recommendations and was willing to consider our proposals moving forward on the 27th of January. So, members, can I ask for your provision of delegated authority to myself and Andy to ensure that final paragraph is right, and then we'll agree the report for publication. Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Right, members, that takes us on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 4, which is the report of the working groups. So, 2 working groups, the budget working group and the performance group. Christopher, we had a meeting of the budget working group 2 weeks ago. By exception, is there anything that you would like to tell the panel on, other than the fact that it was a very successful meeting? Ably chaired.
Yeah, thank you. I think that your finance person, Sarah, has done a very good job. Since I took over the budget group, we have managed to get a really good working relationship. She's providing just as much information we want in a succinct form. So that's good. Clearly it does raise issues and those questions, and I think some of which will be discussed later.
Thank you, Christopher. Philip?
Can I just say that I think she was doing a good job before you took over as chairman of the working group as well.
Yes, but the panel never understood before, and now the panel understands, Philip, so watch out. Okay. Andy?
Thank you. Yeah, in the performance and planning group, we have 4 priorities around rape, domestic violence, one-on-one communications and total crime outcomes. So we'll continue to monitor performance against each of those as we go forward. We had a really good briefing on domestic abuse and domestic violence this time around, and we asked if that could be set out into a briefing to circulate around the wider panel. I thought it would be really helpful if all the panel see it. Ditto with the briefing we had on serious and organised crime, where we have got a detailed briefing to share around, and I'll ask John to do that. And then finally, we had a discussion at the end of the meeting about the new police ICT system, and we thought it would be one to come onto our radar in terms of monitoring the performance of that as that's rolled out over the coming 12 months onwards.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Members, does anybody have any questions of Andy? Obviously some good work going on and reports to follow. Okay, thank you much indeed. That takes us to the work programme, which is agenda item number 5. Members, by exception, does anybody have anything to say about the work programme?
Can I ask the Police Commissioner if and where you are with selecting a Deputy Police Commissioner? Turn it off.
Before I answer that question, can I suggest, Mr. Chairman, put the lights on? The folks on TV won't be able to see.
Are we all in the dark again,
soon.
Philip?
Yeah, it may be a good thing. Derek, thank you for that. Yes, I will be taking steps to seek a Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner after Christmas, probably after the budget, I would think. It isn't compulsory, but we're told that under the PCC review it is going to become compulsory, so there is a succession, a sort of a legally based succession, should anything happen to any of the commissioners. So, yeah, that's in hand.
Hello, everybody. Grief. Okay, thank you very much indeed. So work is ongoing to appoint a Deputy Commissioner, and we wish you luck with the selection process. Right, thank you. Members, agenda item number 5. Anybody, any views on the work programme? We're happy to note. Thank you very much indeed. Which takes us on to agenda item number 6, which is the dates of the future meetings. 27th of January, and we'll be at Stratford upon Avon. And again, we'll do some promotion to try and encourage local members to attend and take part in the meeting, and the same on the 7th of April. So, members, are you happy with those matters? Yeah. That takes us to agenda item number 7, which is urgent items. Does anybody have any urgent items? No, thank you much indeed. Right, that takes us to agenda item number 8, which is me formally reading out the Local Government Act and expelling members of the public. I have had an email this morning from a member of the public asking why it was necessary to put the Chief Constable's presentation under the Local Government Act exclusion of confidentiality. On this matter, I communicated back with them saying there are issues of business continuity and contract employment and discussions that we're going to move into, so it is commercially sensitive. So I'm happy that today's move is appropriate. So I will ask you just to take that into note as we move forward. The other thing, members, is, as you know, we've got David Carter here, sitting here from the Joint Audit and Standards Group. We've taken some advice from Caroline, the solicitor, who's double-checked it, and the advice that we've had back is that David is not here as a member of the public, so it is appropriate for David to stay during the confidential session. So, members, I am going to read out the exclusion, and before I ask you to vote on it, could you please just consider those 2 items when you make your vote. So, members, I'm making a move to close the public session and propose a motion that members of the public be excluded from the meeting for the items mentioned below on the grounds that their presence would involve the disclosure of exempt information as defined by paragraph 3 and 7 of Schedule 12A of Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972. Members, can I ask your views and your support on that motion, please? Agreed. Thank you. And that's unanimous. So thank you. John, can we please stop the video recording? Okay, well, we're going to have one of those embarrassing 2 minutes then when we all sit here saying nothing and twiddling our thumbs until the message comes through.
Can you ensure the recording is stopped as well as the broadcast, because they are 2 separate things?
Okay. So, John, recording as well as broadcasting?